Okay, I'm calling to order the May Board of Trustees meeting, the Board of Library Trustees meeting. And we start with a roll call.
Trustee Felgood.
Here.
Trustee Joshi.
Present.
Trustee Petty.
Here.
Vice Chair Thompson.
Here.
And Chair Moreau.
Present. Okay, so we're starting off today with a presentation. And Inga, you want to introduce the presentation?
Sure. So we have a tradition of having staff give presentations to the library board. And we haven't been able to follow that tradition for quite some time. But anyway, it's sort of an informal opportunity for staff members to present on either a project that they've recently completed or something that they're working on that we think will be of interest to the board and to the community who may be watching. And so since summer is all about summer reading, we thought we would have a presentation from staff about summer reading. So Kim is going to talk about children and teens, and Francesca will talk about an adult summer reading program that she's been working on. So should we start off? Kim, do you want to tell us about kids and teens and what the theme is and what we're going to be up to?
Sure. I'm going to share my screen really quick. Oh, can't share my screen.
Francesca can give you permissions, I think.
Okay. But anyway, so summer reading runs from June 1st through July 31st. So that starts next week. And it's for all ages, children through adults. We're using Beanstalk again, which is an online reading log system that actually the state library started paying for last year when COVID hit. So we have a free subscription and it's pretty cool. Everybody can make an account and you can do it on a device with an app, or you can log in on a computer. But of course, we also have paper forms if somebody absolutely doesn't want to do the online option. But our website is monterey.beanstalk.org, and you can register yourself, or you can log in as a parent and make accounts for all your kids. And that way you can earn badges as you read so many minutes and so many minutes and so many minutes. And it also has challenge activities like read to somebody else, go read outside, you know, just kind of fun things to mix it up during the summer. So everybody will have access to Beanstalk again. If you do Beanstalk, you can, if you finish all your hours of reading, you can get in on the Raffle Prizes. So you earn a book, of course. We've been doing that for years and years and years. And then you can also earn a ticket to enter for a raffle prize. And we've got, can you see the prizes? Is it scrolling? Okay, great. So we picked some colorful prizes this year. Oh, because I forgot to say, Reading Colors Your World is the theme this year. So we've got some Lego Gearbots, like crafty air clay, science stuff. And for the little kids, we have the Day the Crayons Quit puppet sets and books about crayons and a giant green crayon. Oh, the other thing for children, we are dividing up the summer. Each week is a different color for all 9 weeks. And Orcadia is recording a color themed story time for each week. So that'll be pre-recorded and it'll roll out. So the first week is red. So the story time will be all about red. And then our on-call librarian, Peggy, has put together these art kits for each week. So people can come in and pick up a bag that has an art kit that's about a certain color. And each kit has a different activity. And then there's instructions in there about what you can use the supplies for. So these are just a few examples. There's like for the orange week, you get a bunch of felt things and it talks about making collages. For the black week, it's like, you know, designs black. What can you do with these black beans on white paper? And you've also gotten some glue this so you can make something. You can make a pinwheel and color it, and there's a painting. So there's different art supplies for each week. So that's going to be really exciting. And then for teenagers, we also are doing a cool art program. There's a local artist called Kenton Hoppus, and this is an example of some of his work. And he is going to be recording some tutorial videos for activities that teach color theory. And so there's going to be a video about, hey, this is how you can use color to decorate a t-shirt. Grab any like white t-shirt you have at home, and then you can make it. And then he's going to do, the next one will be about a different aspect of color theory. So I think he has 5 videos total that he's going to be doing. And so those will roll out throughout the summer. And then what else was I going to mention? And again, the teens will be doing Beanstack to log their reading. And they are entering the raffle for Revival ice cream gift cards. And again, that's what the adults are raffling too. They'll get a free book and a chance at winning an ice cream gift card. I think I covered the various activities. It's been hard to, determine exactly what we're going to be capable of doing with the amount of staff we have, with the budget, with the COVID restrictions. So it's been a tricky year, but I think it's coming together, and it seems like kids are going to have a lot of fun, and adults.
Kim, you might want to mention what we're doing for the recreation camps and also
yes.
La Mesa.
So La Mesa's Tech Connection contacted us. They have a day camp for kids there. And then we connected with Recreation for some of their playground day camps. And we did this in past years, but we put together a cart of books, like paperbacks, and we put stickers on them that say, but you can borrow this book from the Monterey Public Library. And then the kids, if they have downtime after eating lunch, or they're tired and they don't want to run around, they can grab a book and sit down and read, or they can take it home at night and they don't need a library card or have to deal with their parent taking them to the library. And then they also get paper reading logs. So if they want to log their reading throughout the summer, then we'll connect with them in July and help them get prizes. So we've got 4 day camps right now that we're going to give a cart of books to and reading logs to.
Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Bob.
A couple questions, Kim. Would you repeat the website URL that a parent should go on to find out about this?
It's Monterey.beanstack.
What?
Beanstack, like bean, like a string bean and a stack.
Like LL Bean.
Yeah. So Monterey.beanstack.org.
Okay.
Or if you have like an iPad or another tablet or phone and it has an app store, if you search for Beanstack, and then it'll ask you what library are you with, and then it'll connect you that way too.
Okay, and it's Beanstack, STACK.
Yeah.
Second question is, when they sign up, do they sign up by age group? So an 8-year-old would be in a different group from an 11-year-old, for example?
Yes. Yeah, and the challenges are geared towards age level. So there's I think, and there's a little bit of overlap if the parent wants to, if the teen is like a preteen versus teen, but it sends them based on the age registered to the appropriate program. So there's pre-readers, which is 0 through 5, and then there's I can't think of the term we use, like early readers, which is like elementary school, and then there's like the middle school level readers, and then there's teens, and then there's adults.
And oh shoot, what was I going? Even though they attend each session remotely from home, right? Before that, they come to the library and they get supplies of different kinds?
The art kits, yes. The art kits, we're going to put some of the information online, or we can always email it to someone. But if they want to actually have the supplies for free, they have to come pick them up.
But when the class occurs, say it's at 10 o'clock someday, they're doing it from home.
Yeah, and it's all going to be like either instructions or videos, so they can do it at their convenience.
And lastly, I just want to say, this sounds great. As a former day camp counselor, in between sessions during high school and undergraduate college. This sounds like a fantastic nuance or addition to at least what I remember standard day camp being.
It does. Jennifer?
Yeah, just a couple things. One is, will there be information on the library website with a link to the Beanstalk site? And what, as trustees, can we do to support this? Do you need volunteers? Do you need donations? Do you need behind the scenes scut work done? As a former children's librarian and a retired librarian, I'd really like to support this effort. It's a far cry from when I worked for MPL and we did storytelling in the parks and we did, stuff in person. And it's so great that we're doing something and something so dynamic. But is there any need that we can fulfill for you to help support this effort?
Sure. So first of all, yes, it will be on the website. We're cramming in all the final details so that that's ready to go at the beginning of next week. And then I would say the main thing right now is we need people to help spread the word. And that's either like we'll post on social media, sharing it on social media. We have a ton of bookmarks that we got. So if you know of anywhere where you could drop off some bookmarks that people might pick up. I think the challenge is going to be, since the library is going to be closed at the start of the summer reading program, making sure people are aware that we're still doing something and they can participate.
Do you have access to the Next Door Neighbor blog? Because that would be a great place to post this information. And if you don't have an account and you aren't up there, I do. If you send me what you want, I will be more than happy to post it for you.
That's a good idea. I think the city of Monterey has an account, and we can connect and with them to have it posted and shared probably.
Okay.
But we could share the flyer and
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And the city, how about this? The city of Monterey sends out those daily updates.
Yeah, that would be a good place to post it too.
Yeah.
And maybe maybe the MC Weekly.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
they did have a summer guide and we had an ad in there, but that was already a couple weeks ago. So we need to remind them.
Yeah.
And then we're hoping we might have some outdoor programs in July. So if that happens, we'll need some volunteers to help just be there.
Yeah.
So we'll call on you, Trustee Felgut. That would be great.
Oh, yeah. Kate Avergoff and I used to do the storytelling at Casanova Oak Knolls Park and La Mesa and, various sites throughout Monterey. It was really a hoot.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so then, more questions?
Anybody else? Okay, let's move on then.
Because
we'll turn it
we're
over to
going to have Francesca talk about a special program for adults.
Okay. Let's see. So this summer, I just want to make sure, yes. Can you still see that shared screen okay? Okay. So Book to Action is a program of the California Library Association. It's supported in whole or in part by the U.S. Institute of Museum and Library Services under the provisions of the Library Services and Technology Act that is administered in California by the state librarian. This year's Book to Action has 3 focus themes: equity, health, and sustainability. We chose the book Cast by Isabel Wilkerson to read for this community read. So the Book to Action program, there are 110 participating library locations. You can see the statistics here of how many are involved. The initiative is to tackle important issues in the community and to encourage reading, community discussion, and action. I imagine that most of you are familiar, at least, with CAST. It explores how America today and throughout its history has been shaped by a hidden caste system. The grant provided funding for 80 copies of the book, 20 were added to the collection, and 60 will be distributed to participating organizations. We also have at least another 80 digital books that will be available for checkout that was also provided by the grant. So we'll be asking and having a link on the website for local organizations and businesses to sign up to participate, to be an ally organization. And that is encouraging them to involve their staff or their members, and they can also receive up to 5 free copies of the book to share amongst their organization. And then we'll also list their name on our website as well. That is one area. Once that link is live, hopefully tomorrow, I can send it to you, and it would be great if you can share with any organizations that you know who might be interested in being involved. We'll be hosting a series of book discussions. It will be the same one offered 2 times during the week. The book is split into 5 sections because it is a fairly large book. There are, of course, also the audiobooks available for anyone that needs. It will be on Zoom. Right now, we're not discussing a hybrid model, so all of these will be Zoom. People can go between either Tuesday or Saturday. They're not locked into one. We also have John Powell, who's the executive or the director of the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley, who will be speaking on Wednesday, June 30th. He will be also having additional programs as well, adding into this, since the actual series won't end until the end of July. So stay tuned for an actual panel at the end. And then lastly, Sean is is organized 6 genealogy research classes with Kathy Nielsen, who is a local librarian at the library. And then he also is having monthly history talks with Tim Thomas. And those are all on Zoom as well. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Yeah, I had a quick, so that each library has their own discussion, or is this one large discussion with all the participating libraries?
Each library selects the book they will choose to have for their community read, and then each library hosts their discussion. So we are actually the only library that selected CAST. So I won't be surprised if there might be some of the other library staff or maybe community that might join our program to participate. Yes.
I see. And so you're facilitating, or it's a self-facilitating thing, or?
The book discussions will be facilitated by a local volunteer who regularly runs book discussion groups on the themes of equity and diversity and inclusion. And she's actually read this book twice already. And we've also received some of the questions from other libraries. So we'll have those in advance to send to participants so they can know what the questions will be.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Sounds really exciting.
I'd just like to offer a comment on the, I did attend the one last week, I believe it was, on the history tour with Tim Thomas, and I thought it was very good. I learned a lot and thought it was very well done. So my compliments on a good start to that program.
Thank you. So I just wanted to add regarding Book to Action, it is a competitive grant process, and Francesca submitted the grant. And so we're very proud to be part of the series and part of the program and be a participating library. So she's been planning all the activities and getting partners involved, and the Community Foundation is one of our partners. So we're really excited to be doing this.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay, so now we move on to our consent calendar. Which is just one item on the consent calendar. And I entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So move.
Second.
Trustee Felgood. Oh, I was doing the roll call.
Yeah, I think we're ready to vote on
Oh, yes.
Trustee Joshi.
Yes.
Trustee Petty.
Yes.
Vice Chair Thompson.
Yes.
Chair Moreau.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we move on to public comments. And
We do encourage members of the public to join our meeting via Zoom Gov, a secure service for use by government agencies. You will be connected live in real time to the meeting. This meeting is also streamed live on youtube.com/City of Monterey with an approximate 10-second delay, and on Comcast channel 25 with up to a 90-second delay. If you plan to make a public comment, join the meeting using Zoom or by telephone and ensure you join in time to accommodate the delay. To join the meeting on Zoom, use the link or phone number on the Library Board of Trustees agenda at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial toll-free 833-568-8864, enter meeting ID 161-352-8864, followed by the pound sign. If prompted to enter a participant ID, press pound. Detailed instructions on using Zoom are available at monterey.org/public meetings. To make a public comment, raise your hand using Zoom, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. At this time, there are no public comments.
okay, thank you. Okay, so we move on to our public appearance items. Number 3 is the trust fund budgets for FY 22 and 23. So Inga.
Okay, so we talked about this at our last meeting, and there were some things about the numbers that needed to be cleaned up, and so I'm bringing it back to you today. And as a matter of fact, I had to send you a revised proposed trust fund budget spreadsheet a couple of days ago, because yet again, a couple errors were found in the spreadsheet, which then gave some numbers that didn't quite make sense. So, so what you have before you are the revised numbers, and under fiscal implications, I'll just remind you that the trust fund balance as of March 31st of this year was $609,930. But if you exclude the special monies set aside for a bookmobile replacement, that leaves $440,702. And then in this coming year, we anticipate a revenue of approximately $111,000, and that's a very conservative estimate. And then for the following year, again, because we don't know all of the details of what will be happening the following year, we also are estimating the same amount. And then the proposed expenditure for fiscal year 21-22 is $231,944. And in the following year, I had said it was $107,301, but there was an error there. So the expenditure, as in your revised spreadsheet that I sent out, would be $115,001. I did want to point out that it's not as if we are spending all of the monies that we proposed spending in this year's budget. And so there are amounts that we're rolling over and proposing to spend instead in next year's budget. And Bob had, or Trustee Petty had asked about that, I believe, at our last meeting. And an example is if you look at the very bottom of the trust fund spreadsheet, there's a capital outlay for equipment of $13,788. We haven't spent a penny of that this year, and we just haven't had the ability with our staffing situation to spend that money. It is money that the Friends and Foundation gave us specifically for children's furniture, and so we're rolling it over into next year's budget. Proposed budget, and so that's why you see that same figure in that same line for the next year. Now, ideally, next year we spend it all, so the following year there isn't any amount listed. if we get to the middle and towards the end of next year and we're like, whoops, we didn't spend it all, then we'll put a figure in there for the next year. So I am happy to take any questions at this time. Yes, Jim.
Just one question, and I appreciate the numbers, the revised numbers. They all seem to make sense now. And last month they were a little confusing, so I appreciate the effort to do that. But my question was in the next item on our agenda about the overall library budget. It mentions that the city is probably going to be doing a one-year budget instead of the normal two-year budget that they've been doing for the last several years. So I'm wondering, does it really make sense for us to approve an FY23 proposed budget, or should we separate that out and really just be dealing with the proposed 22 budget?
So I would say that's up to the trustees, what you would prefer to do. I would recommend that you just do 1 year, since it's a one-year budget, but this had originally been proposed as a 2-year budget because we didn't know that the city had made that change yet. So I wanted you to see both years. And so that's why you have both years in front of you.
Well, we can come back to that later after any public input, but just one thought would be to approve the 23 in concept, but not a formal approval, since I'm hoping things will look up a little bit more and we may have a different view of what the 23 budget should be, a year from now.
Okay. Now, and another thing that I wanted to point out that I did in this spreadsheet for you is some of the monies that we propose allocating are from the undesignated trust fund monies. So for instance, if I'm a supporter of the library and I give the library $1,000 and I say, spend it wherever you need it, that gift is unrestricted. On the other hand, when the Friends gave us money for children's furniture, that money is considered restricted and we wouldn't spend it on something else. We might go back to the donor and say, guess what? We have this greater need. Would you mind if we spend the money on something else? So in order to distinguish between those two types of proposed expenditures, ones where you really have more flexibility than others, I put the ones that are unrestricted, if you're looking at a color printout of this chart or on your screen, are in green. So for instance, let's go back to the capital outlay, that's not in green. And so if you said, we don't want the library to spend $13,788 on children's furnishings, then I would have to go back to the donor and say, do you mind if we change that? At one point you had approved it, the board had approved it. But if we look at another item, for instance, programming youth, we're requesting $2,500. That's coming out of just the unrestricted funds. And you could say, you know what, we'd rather it be $2,000 or $28,100 dollars. So that gives you a bit more of an idea about how the budget is constructed.
So just a quick question. My understanding is that before this, say FY19 or FY18, some normal year, many of these expenditures that are on here would not come out of the trust fund. They would have come from the city. Am I correct? So that youth supplies and programming for children and those kinds of things were in our original budget.
So it's been at least since 2008 that the programming costs have come out of the trust fund. It might have been a little bit earlier than that, that we had a big layoff of positions. We had a big budget shortage, but I think it was the .com crash in 2008. And so in an effort to try to save positions, we looked at the operating budget and we thought, which items on operating budget could we move over to the trust fund? And so children's programs and adult programs and teen programs have been things that now have been paid out of the trust fund for a number of years. But
Okay.
there are other items, for instance, well, this year is a great example with collection development.
Mhm.
Typically, the city has
Yeah.
funded collection development, and then donations go towards enhancing an existing, process of purchasing new materials. This year, there were no new materials if we didn't have monies designated in the trust fund.
And things like the local history librarian, for example, that was a regular city position, right? So all the positions, except for the fund development officer, were in this original.
And actually, fund development, we had up until 2019, September of 2019, we had a full-time budgeted fund development officer, and 65% of that position was paid out of the general fund and 35% was paid out of the trust fund.
Right.
But when that person left, the position was frozen and then it wasn't funded. And now we're trying to squeak by with 20 hours a week of a fund development officer paid through the trust fund.
Right. And what was the other one? Things like promotion. That was originally in the city budget, but or it has been.
So there was some promotion monies in the city budget, but it's gradually tapered off. And especially as we started doing a combined newsletter with the Friends have helped support some of those costs. So, and then also the costs of the fund development program have traditionally come out of the trust fund.
Right. Are there other questions? Trustee Petty.
Looking at one of the, pardon me, several bottom lines in this chart, why is there such a big difference in the supplies and services amount from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 23?
So in fiscal year 22, we know that we have received some gifts. So for instance, the Friends wish list has been received, and in the April wish list has been received, and those monies are for fiscal year 22. But in fiscal year 23, we don't know what the gifts will be, and so we don't have those monies allocated.
So if we were to get an extra $90,000 for fiscal year 23 to bring the amount available close to what we see here for fiscal 22, then that bottom line number would be elevated to be more like fiscal 22.
Right. So, and if you look at fiscal year 22, 23, you see mostly green numbers, and those are monies that are coming out of the unrestricted amount of the trust fund. But in fiscal year 22, you see interspersed in there a lot of numbers that are in black, and that's because that's a gift that we've received for that purpose.
Other questions or comments on this? Bob.
I would just comment Jim's point on if the city's only doing a one-year budget, maybe we only should consider one of the two future years on this chart. And I mean that the point is well taken. I would just observe, however, that this is a proposal or a plan, and proposals and plans are not in concrete, and they can be changed as circumstances change. And I think we could approve a proposal because it could be changed a year from now, or a plan to do something could be changed a year from now. If all of a sudden we got a whole lot, well, the plans for this past year were changed all of a sudden when the city's budget went down, right? So if something equally dramatic happened for fiscal 23, then anything that we approved as a proposal would necessarily and could be modified, I think.
On the other side, I could comment that the trust fund is going down a lot faster than it had been in the past number of years because we have picked up a number of these expenses, more of the expenses than we had before. And to go on record as being picking up expenses that the city formerly picked up, it seems to me unlikely that the city would then come forward and pick up any of those expenses.
Oh, I agree. And the difference between 22 and fiscal year 22 and 23 is $120,000. So we're actually accepting a proposal that is not dependent on getting a whole lot of extra money from donations via the trust fund. It shows that, you know, a much lower amount. And if we did get more, then that amount could be raised. But I think it demonstrates that we're not counting on, you know, Mary Jane to raise everything.
So I'll also remind you that during the course of the year, in fact, almost every month, we've asked for funds to be appropriated. So as gifts come in, we ask that are restricted for special things, we ask you to appropriate those gifts. And then the amount that we're proposing to spend out of the trust fund goes up because we have a new gift to spend. And that's sort of how the trust fund works throughout the year. So it is a very
It's fluid.
changes. Fluid, thank you.
Right. So do I entertain a motion?
And I suggest we ask for public input first.
Oh, sorry, public input.
We encourage members of the public to join our meeting via Zoom Gov. You will be connected live in real time to the meeting. To join by telephone, please dial toll-free 833-568-8864. Enter meeting ID number 161-352-8864, followed by the pound sign. If prompted to enter a participant ID, press pound. To make a public comment on Zoom, raise your Zoom hand. And if you are connected by telephone, please dial *9. There are no public comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now.
In that case, I'd be happy to move that we approve the proposed fiscal year 22 and 23 library trust fund budgets with the clear understanding that the FY23 budget would be reviewed further next year as well as throughout the year.
I'd be happy to second that motion.
Okay, I guess we're ready for a vote.
Trustee Felgood,
Yes.
Trustee Joshi,
Yes.
Trustee Petty,
Yes.
Vice Chair Thompson,
Yes.
and Chair Moreau.
Yes,
Thank you.
unanimously approved. Now we move on to the update on the budget process, the city budget process for FY 21-22 and 22-23.
Yes. So as we get closer and closer to the time when the budget is adopted, this is a traditional report that I provide to let you know what's happening. And let's see, so one of the things that I shared is that the city has decided to just propose to the city council a 1-year budget instead of a 2-year budget. And there are so many unknowns as our state reopens, as businesses come back, And so it just seemed more prudent to plan a one-year budget than a two-year budget. And then we also have a lot of staffing changes in our finance department, with our finance director having left for Milpitas, and then our assistant finance director leaving to become a full-time dad. So and people stepping in to help as consultants, it just seemed a good thing to look at a one-year budget. So the numbers that you had approved, that I submitted to the city manager and the finance team, and they approved those numbers and are planning to carry them forward to city council. The one change that I went line by line through with our assistant finance director before he left, just to make sure, but the one change was because there are aspects of personnel costs that departments aren't given the formulas to calculate, the cost of staff positions is going to look higher when you see library folded in with all the other departments. And that's not because there are any additional positions or because we did the math wrong. It's just there are things like unfunded actuarial accrued liability that I did factor in. And then, so the plan is on June 15th, the council will, in the evening session, the council will discuss the budget, and they'll be asked to adopt a budget at that time. But if they have questions and they send it back to city staff to make any adjustments or changes, then the second reading and adoption will take place, if necessary, on the 29th of June. So that's the update.
Okay, any questions or comments? I guess I had one question, and that is, so no decisions will be made on moving forward with any implementations until June, at the earliest June 15th, I'm assuming.
So for our reopening, since it's staff dependent and we won't know for sure about staff positions that we're requesting that are in addition to the 4 full-time staff positions that we have. Yep, we need to wait.
Any other comments? Okay.
I'm pleased to see the 2 statements. One, that city manager has stated that he found the library board general fund request to be fair and reasonable. I'm pleased to see that in here. And secondly, I'm especially pleased, and I hope it's not too optimistic, to read that it is anticipated that it'll take 2 or 3 years for Monterey's economy to recover. I mean, that sounds like a whole lot less doomsday than what I've been sort of anticipating.
So
I'm just pleased to see that they're not saying 4 or 5 or 6 years.
right, and it's so unknown, you know, we have to wait and see how quickly the year starts off and how things progress. And then that's Monterey's economy in general. And then there's the question of the city's finances. And as we know, prior to the pandemic, we were in a financial crisis. So we know that for the city budget, we're going to be moving forward in a very conservative fashion.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. I think we can just move forward on the item 5, which is the revised.
Chair Moreau,
Yes.
just because I noticed that an attendee did join the meeting, if we can open to
Offer public comment?
just
Sure,
on this one, just briefly in the chance.
absolutely.
So for anyone joining us live, you're welcome to raise your Zoom hand. If you'd like to join us by telephone, please dial toll-free 833-568-8864, enter meeting ID 161-352-8864, followed by the pound sign. We do have a public comment. And Mayor Clyde, you are allowed to unmute yourself now. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I just wanted to tune in. Thank you very much for your service. And it was very appropriate, I think, that I turned in when you were discussing the budget. So we're keeping our fingers crossed. Things are looking up. My biggest fear is, as you are too, I'm sure, variants, and we don't need any mutation on. And so hopefully people will continue to get vaccinated. So it's not really a public comment because we will be reviewing this in June, as it was pointed out. I wanted to give Inga a shout out to her and your staff, Francesca, and I forget who helps with your museum. I watched the Museums and Cultural Arts Committee for a while. Very, very high-powered, bright people who want to do everything and open everything right now. And don't we all? But I thought the staff put it in a really good perspective that we're doing the best we can, and going forward as a team, we'll get there, we'll get to our goals. And the library was especially hit hard by the pandemic and sheltering in place, and I'm very aware of that, and that's very concerning. So as we say, Anda, thank you all for your service again. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you.
One of these days. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
That was nice.
There are no further callers.
Okay. So now we'll move on to the reopening plan, the revised reopening plan. And Inga, you want to?
Sure. So I worked on this reopening plan with our committee, the Ad Hoc Committee on the library reopening. And I believe with this plan, which is being presented to you for approval, then that will be the end of the tasks for the reopening committee, because as we know, we don't have standing committee, or it's not a standing committee. But just as a bit of information, is we looked, when we thought about our plan, we of course want to take our patron and staff safety first. That's our first and foremost concern. And then we want to make sure we're in compliance with all the county and state health orders and guidelines, and also what the city adopts, because we know that the way it works is the state can make one decision, but then at a more local jurisdiction, there can be further restrictions, and we can take a more conservative approach than the state might be taking or the country might be taking. So we want to make sure we comply with all of that. And then we want to make sure we're really responsive to what the community has asked for, and not get caught up in our own idea of what priorities are. And then we have to work within our fiscal constraints. So that's sort of the groundwork. And we hope that this draft plan does, in fact, reflect community priorities and the lessons that we've learned from COVID. And things that we know we want to make use of is staff cross-training and using as much technology for staff efficiencies as possible. Continues to imagine having a very robust volunteer program, and looking at best practices from other libraries. And the idea is that we're going to be phasing this in gradually as the restrictions lift and as funds become available. And so first of all, we looked at the service priorities from the survey that was done previously, and people said their number one priority over and over again is access to collections. That's what they want. And so that's what we really wanted to focus on. And then assistance from our friendly and knowledgeable staff. So we want to make sure we have adequate staff. And then people want Wi-Fi. People had said that they were interested in our friend's store. That was kind of a surprise. We're not quite sure where that came from, but of course the friends are going to have their friend's store. And in fact, they've expanded the ways that they sell books. And then people really like our programs. So currently we have services that we're going to continue, and those are the sidewalk service, although we are going to reduce those hours to a couple a week, and then, I'm sorry, a day, and then see how that goes and see how popular it is. We, of course, will continue phone and email staff assistance, which is something we've traditionally done, but it's been much more heavily used during the pandemic. And then virtual programs for all ages. Francesca mentioned that with the summer program, the book discussions, those are all going to be virtual, and our virtual summer reading program. So in-person programs that we'll be introducing, there'll be, we'll have new in-person hours when we can reopen, which will be Tuesdays through Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And so we're going to have all the services that we offer, will, except for, of course, the virtual things that are provided 24/7 through our website. Everything else will be within those hours. Our library shelves will be open again for browsing. And even just today, I ran into somebody on the sidewalk who said, I just miss being inside the library looking for things myself. And so many people miss that. And I know that if I didn't work in a library, I would desperately miss that as well. So I get that, and we're going to have our shelves open. Reference service will be available in the building. Outdoor programs, we're thinking in July of maybe doing some children's outdoor programs, and then the possibility of hybrid programs if we have the right technology to do that. So as protocols permit. California History Room access, although that might need to be limited by appointment to avoid overcrowding. We'll just have to see. Computer access, so our plan is to have every other computer available. There'll just be fewer desktop computers, and we'll need to be cleaning them in between use, and our laptops will be available so that people can sit in various places in the building. We'll have printing available again, and we'll have seating, but we're gonna start out with reduced seating, just so that we don't have a concern about overcrowding and people being too close to one another. And then our meeting room service is going to be on pause. So we're not going to be making the meeting rooms available to the public to be booked for meetings that they want to hold initially. And that's really for a couple of reasons. One is just because we're going to be so short-staffed, and we know that the focus, our number one priority from our community, is to borrow materials. We want to make sure that staff are focused on that, supporting that activity, as opposed to then branching out into other services that we can offer down the road. So as we have more staffing available, then we'll add to services. We'll add things like meeting rooms, but not initially. And we're going to need to take a careful look and monitor how things are going on a regular basis. We'll talk about surveying in a little bit, but as funding permits and as health restrictions permit, we will open up more things, but we really don't want to overpromise, and we don't want to take on more than we can provide, and provide at a high quality level. So that's our plan. So are there questions? Yes, an additional
I just wanted to add a couple things. So you see the first phase of this plan, the first column is where we are now. And the second one is, where we'll be for the first 6 months once we open. And then the third one is after that. But in some sense, we were in the dark about the regulations. And so in some sense, the later we open, the more likely it will be that we won't have to have hand washing and 6 foot distance and masks and plexiglass and all of those kinds of things. So if there's any sort of silver lining in the cloud, it is that it may be less restrictive than we planned for, and we just don't know. So I think in that sense, we're being cautious, but we may end up not having to put in all these restrictions that are in here.
Yes. Other comments? Trustee Petty, did you have comments about the plan being on the planning committee?
About what?
As a member of the planning committee,
Oh,
you get to put your 2 cents in too.
I was simply going to, well, first off, we have discussed this at great length, and what you see is, as it says, a revised plan, which means that it has been somewhat fluid over the development of the factors that influence what we can and cannot look forward to doing. The one thing in this, in the discussion part of the agenda packet, I do not think that, I mean, obviously, I think we should adopt this revised plan, or else, you know, I don't think the committee would have put it forward for the entire board to decide on. But I don't think that the Ad Hoc Planning Committee should be disbanded at this point for this reason. You know, ad hoc committees are prohibited from having a regular meeting schedule. So the Ad Hoc Planning Committee may not ever need to meet again, but I think it should stay in existence until we actually reopen, even if we don't have to meet again until ever. I think it should stay in existence and available in case, who knows what comes up. Things have come up that we haven't anticipated all throughout all of this. And I just think the Ad Hoc Committee should be in the wings and available until we actually reopen. But, you know, unless something comes up, I'm really happy with what we have in this plan.
If I can respond to that, the ad hoc, as per the Brown Act, the Ad Hoc Committee is only supposed to be in existence for 6 months, and it's already been in existence for a year. So I think the best bet is to, in particular, since there'll be new leadership on the board, to let this committee finish and then establish another committee if we need one. But I think right now the plan sits there until we open, and you're absolutely right. The board needs to assess what happens in the first few months and see how things are working. But I think that that's kind of a different task. I did also want to point out that this plan was very carefully done by Inga to reflect the budget that we proposed. So they absolutely are meshed. And that's why there are more services for the 3rd phase, because we'll get more staff for the 3rd phase. And so those things are coordinated. If in fact the budget is reduced, or we don't get the budget, then either we don't open until we do get the budget, or we have to, you know, revisit it. But I think it was very carefully coordinated. Jim.
I've actually got 4 questions. And I'll start with my first one is related to the staffing required to implement the reopening plan. It seems to me that we have a bit of a timing issue, that the council won't approve the budget until, what is it, mid-June at the earliest, and possibly late June. And we're hoping to open sometime in July. And to open, you need to hire some new staff, some of whom I think probably have to go through an HR process, some of whom may not. I'm not quite clear on that part of it. But anyway, I wondered if you could address kind of the lead time required to have the staff necessary to reopen, and and I'm wondering if there may be some ability, if there are some HR processes that you need to go through to hire those staff, if some of that maybe could be pre-started, even though you may not be able to hire someone until the budget is adopted, but to be more ready to hire by starting earlier than waiting until after council approval to even start that process, if you understand what I'm trying to ask. And I'm assuming you probably already thought through that, but I just wanted to kind of hear what your sense of that is.
So a lot of the staffing in the first 6 months is on call, and on-call staff require a different process than regular part-time or full-time. And in fact, people who are currently working on call can continue to work on call. So that part is covered. Then for a couple of other positions, I have to work with HR, which I'm doing, about whether or not people who are on our layoff list can be eligible to be moved into those positions. If that's the case, there's much less involved on the HR side of things than if a recruitment process needs to go forward. And then as far as recruitment goes, if recruitment is necessary, I'm not anticipating needing to do any open recruitments. I believe that there are, amongst city staff and amongst our staff, there's an adequate pool to do internal recruitments.
So,
But I agree that I can get things as lined up as possible with HR before before the budget is approved.
If I could follow through on that, unless you want to do first, Marcia?
no, go ahead, and then I'll.
Is it your sense so far, Inga, that HR and the city manager's office will cooperate with you in trying to make those steps, the kind of the common sense steps that you might be able to take to get ready once the budget is approved? Or would it be helpful for the board to take some action today to emphasize the importance of that?
I think that it doesn't hurt to have the board take some action or include something in the motion that encourages that, so then I have the board support to say we really need to get moving on this. The one thing I didn't mention previously is our HR director is also temporarily away. So the city is sort of short-staffed in key positions right now. But the rest of the HR staff are trying to do the best they can and working very hard.
Okay, well, before I continue on to my second question, Marcia, did you want to come back, follow up on this one?
No, it was kind of the same, it was along the same line. I just found it interesting. We did send this plan to the city manager and the assistant city manager before we submitted it to the board packet. And the city manager remarked that one of his suggestions was that we should put an opening date into the plan. And I perceive it as a sort of chicken and egg problem.
Yeah.
We can't put an opening date into the plan unless we know that we're going to get the money, and we have to have the plan with an opening, without an opening date then. I mean, so I think that reinforces the idea that we really need to say that this plan can't go forward without an opening date, without a commitment for the budget to fund the plan.
In fact, just to follow up on that, I'm wondering if it would be helpful at all or make any sense for us to designate a target date, realizing that it's dependent on the budget being approved and that kind of thing, or if there are too many unknowns at this point to try to come up with a target date.
I don't think at this point we're quite ready for a target date.
Okay.
I did see Trustee Joshi's hand raised earlier.
Oh, I didn't. I'm sorry.
You wanna speak?
I didn't see.
Okay, so I wrote it down because it doesn't seem to be working too well. I was going to ask about, at the time that we reopen, will we be discontinuing the quarantining material, or the material that we do now? Because if people are going to be browsing and you also have the quarantine requirement, that means they can't put things back.
Yes. So it's anticipated that quarantine will be lifted on June 15th,
Okay,
when the restrictions are lifted by our governor.
thanks.
And in the meantime, a lot of libraries in California are eliminating their quarantine process based on various studies and so forth. So quarantine is fading into the past.
That's wonderful. So perhaps, well, before we entertain a motion, we should ask for public comment on the plan. If there are no more comments, Jim.
Yeah, actually, I had a total of 4 questions and I've only gotten through one of them. So I don't mean to hog the discussion. So if anybody else wants to ask their questions first, that's fine. But if not, I'll go ahead with my others. And actually, before I do that, I meant to say this earlier, but I wanted to compliment Inga and also the committee, Marcia and Bob, for all the work in putting this plan together. It seems to me it's well formulated, makes a lot of sense, and reflects a lot of work. And I appreciate it very much. So my questions are just kind of clarification sorts of things. And one of those clarifications has to do with the sidewalk service. I think it's interesting to continue with that for a period of time for people that may be a little not comfortable yet coming inside the library. Well, hopefully a lot of people will feel comfortable, but I'm not quite having trouble visualizing how that would work, since right now the sidewalk service obviously occupies the whole area of the entrance, and I'm assuming we'll use that entrance for the public once we reopen. So I was, without getting into too much logistical detail, I wonder if you could just give a broad brush discussion of how you envision that happening, the sidewalk service while we reopen.
Right. Well, this is something that the committee talked about at length, and we had attended a webinar that was about reopening libraries, and the leaders of the webinar had said, you know, sidewalk service is one of those things that your customers are going to now expect, and if at all possible, they recommended, you know, continuing it in some form. So we thought we would give it a try. We realized that some folks still are not comfortable going out into the public, and they might not be able to access the library if the requirement was to come back into the building. So we want to give it a try. The challenge for us is in our budget proposal for staffing, we didn't anticipate what's needed for sidewalk service, which is essentially you need to run a second desk. And so that's partly why the hours are going to be limited to 2 hours a day. And then we had to find another location, and we're not one of those libraries that has a drive-up window or a convenient sort of place to do this with the building open. And so we're going to be using our staff entrance on Pacific Street, and we're going to need to assign staff to staff that sidewalk service. And then they're going to need to go from that back door out to where the public hold shelves are, grab whatever it is the customer wanted, and then come back to that back door again. So it's going to be a little bit of a delay, although librarian Kim Smith said she did use sidewalk service at another library recently, and it took 5 minutes between the time when she showed up with her library card and the time that she walked away with the book. So I think people will be patient as we need to run and get things. What we won't be able to do is some people show up at the window and say, oh, do you have any James Patterson? I've read this one, you know, what's he published after this date? And then we say, oh, we'll go look in the shelves for you. We won't be able to do that. We'll suggest that they call and talk to somebody at our reference desk, and then we'll place something on hold for them because we really won't have that capacity to do that. But other than that, we'll have somebody who will be try doing the sidewalk service, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, good.
Can I add to that? Right now, we don't entertain requests at the front door, do we?
We do.
You mean if I said I want a book by James Patterson, somebody'd run off and look for it?
Yes,
Well,
so we have some folks who,
that-
for
Then I've
instance,
been out in left field because I thought the whole sidewalk service was dependent on me having gone online, placed a hold, and received notification that the hold is available for me to come and quickly pick up, rather than me placing an order on the spot. And so I'm, you know,
that's the principle. But
Yeah.
things happen such as, oh, this is in Spanish. I didn't want it in Spanish. Or, oh, wait, this is an audio book.
well,
I
yeah,
wanted
those
a
kinds
large
of mistakes.
print.
Those kinds of mistakes, but I didn't think ever somebody could just go up, like driving up to KFC and order a tub or a bag of chicken wings and then have it gotten for them. I thought we had to place the order and receive notification that it was actually ready for me before I could show up and take it home.
I
And
believe,
that's the way I think it ought to work.
yeah, I believe there's a sign in the front that says something to the effect that if the staff has time,
Well,
try to accommodate requests, that
Yeah.
are put on reserve. So that,
Exactly.
so if there's a big long line, that allows them to say, I'm sorry, I can't do it right now. If there's nobody else there and they're there and there's, they have the time, I think that was.
well, maybe, but I mean, I think it ought to be limited to a pickup service where you've already received notification that the book you put on hold is there right next to the door. The second thing I wanted to mention is that in response to something Jim said, we're not just continuing this to accommodate the people that may still feel uncomfortable going inside the building. This represents an improved service. And there are a lot of people who, whether they feel uncomfortable or not about going in the building, find this a whole lot more convenient. And they would rather put a book on hold, get told it's ready to pick up, and then go to a sidewalk pickup service and take it home rather than having to go into the library, concerns about disease or not. And so there's that reason for continuing it as well, not just to accommodate people that are still worried about, COVID.
I think part of this, when we get to the part about the survey, I think part of what we plan to do is to ask people, now that the pandemic is over, how much, what services are you planning to use? And that plus gathering data on the use of the daily sidewalk service will let us know, whether we're going in the right direction, I think.
So I think that was question number 2. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And if I could just offer one more comment on the subject, but Bob raises a good point about there being 2 possible reasons for people wanting to use that service. And I don't think we need to resolve it right now, but my personal inclination would be I'm very supportive of continuing sidewalk service for the people that may not feel comfortable as kind of a pandemic related issue. I'm less supportive of adding a kind of a new service that we never had before for people that find it more convenient. I mean, that's in my mind, that's more of a nice to do sort of thing. And when we're in budget constraints, I don't think we should be getting into nice to do sorts of things. We should be focusing, I think, more on the core needs and what we've been trying to redo what we've been doing in the past, unless it's really a great new idea. And just for someone's additional convenience, to me, is not a compelling reason to spend additional staff time and money on that kind of thing. But again, I don't think we need to resolve that now. I think we may have a difference of opinion possibly on the value of
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing to your one more thing that you're adding. So I'll add one more thing. And that is, if we discover that this is something that a lot of people really want, at some point we may need to go back to the city and say, we didn't plan on having this, but we have this overwhelming data that says people really want this and we can't afford it, so we need you guys to pay for it. Or we had explored the idea of book lockers, like some libraries have, where you do that, but that's, you know, $25,000 right there to put in a book locker setup plus a monthly cost, and it's quite expensive. But I'm sure if we were to ask the city, they would say, show us the data. So I think we have to first, you know, do this service and then see what it is that people use and see what it is that people have to say, so that we can go to the city and say, oh, there's this overwhelming demand for this service, and so now we need more money. But I think we didn't put it in the budget originally, so we can't do it. So Jennifer, you have a comment on my comment on June?
Yes, just to leap in briefly, we're going to cover some of this in the next agenda item. Inga and I met and talked about this in relation to the survey. So some of the stuff we're going to be talking about in a few minutes.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to your question 3, Jim.
Okay, thank you. And again, I apologize for taking so much time here, but it's a very comprehensive plan that covers a lot of different issues, some of which are clear to me and many of which are not totally clear. And one of those is the sneeze guards, or whatever they're called, the things. And I realize the health restrictions are kind of an unknown at this point, what it'll be like even next week, to say nothing of July and August. But at this point, is the assumption that we would be installing sneeze guards in various locations? And is there a lead time requirement to get that installed, or kind of what's your view of how that's going to play out?
So when I asked about sneeze guards before, another department had put them in place. They said, oh yeah, we bought them on Amazon. So the idea is we'll buy something on Amazon and install it ourselves. I think that it's just very hard to say. I think that people will feel more comfortable starting out with them. And so that's the idea, is we will get some basic ones and start out with them, knowing that they might just be sort of a psychological help, because people aren't used to just being able to come in and talk to one another.
Do we have the budget and the staffing to make that happen if we decide that that's necessary?
We'll have to take budget funds from elsewhere to do that, but we can do that. Okay. And Mary Jane had a comment.
Just have a comment, and that is that I heard, I think it was last week on, I believe it was NPR, and I don't have a citation, but it was an extremely reputable journalistic source, that there's new, it's research in schools, that after they've begun to see, there's testing that supports it, that plexiglass barriers actually, because they impede the free flow of ventilated air, that more teachers got sick when they were working behind plexiglass than without plexiglass. So I think, I don't know, my gut sense is that Inga's probably right, that they provide a bit of familiar security blanket for people, but just to put a pin in the notion, and I promise to pay better attention next time I hear something like this, that actually they could present more risk than they allay. Sharing that.
Again, just in terms of the timing of the reopening, and I certainly have no opinion on whether they should be installed or not. It's I'm not weighing in on that issue at this point. But if you do think they should be installed, does that require assistance from Public Works or some other department to do it, or you think your own staff would actually install them?
Our own staff will install them. They won't be very complicated. They'll sort of just be sort of like giant plexiglass bookends.
Okay, very good. Then I won't belabor that anymore. Then my last one is kind of a minor point, but You mentioned earlier the public printing being something, and I know we had talked earlier about trying to improve the process for the public printing, and I've lost track of that issue, and I was just curious if you could give an update on whether that'll be a better process for that will be available when we reopen or not yet.
Not yet. So Kim Smith, Librarian Smith, was exploring some other options, but we haven't gotten very far with that in summer reading planning.
Yeah,
Sort of
I understand.
took
There's at
priority.
least-
But do you have anything to add, Kim?
I was just gonna say, so some of the options we were looking at, there were a lot of pros and cons. And it's our public internet stations run on a proprietary system. And so the printing with that, it's like if you try to combine a new printing thing, it doesn't necessarily make sense. But so we need to do more research.
So we might need to change the proprietary system that we're using to manage the public computers before we can get a better solution for printing.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm sorry to take so long with my questions, but thank you very much.
But
Those
to
are
go-
great.
But I had another question based on your question, and that is things like the sneeze guards. It's quite possible that before we get ready for that last push to open, there will be a directive that comes down from the state that reflects what Mary Jane was saying. Don't use sneeze guards because they are not helpful. In such case, then I'm assuming that your progress through this reopening plan is going to be based on the latest, and in fact, that's what it says in the plan. Follow CDPH and MCHD guidelines, and so it's possible that these things won't happen depending on the guidelines. I mean, everything is a moving target here.
That is one of the challenges. Yes.
Okay. Any other comments, input on this plan? All right, so we should take some public comment. See if there anybody else wants to say anything.
Yes. We always encourage members of the public to join our meeting via Zoom Gov. You'll be connected live in real time to the meeting. To join by telephone, please dial toll-free 833-568-8864. Enter meeting ID 161-352-8864, followed by the pound sign. If prompted to enter a participant ID, press pound. To make a public comment on Zoom, you can raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand. When called upon, you may press *6 to unmute yourself. We ask that public commenters turn off TV or computer speakers to ensure there is no background noise that interferes with the broadcast. And we do have a public comment. If you'd like to state your name, you're welcome to do so. You're now able to unmute yourself. Thank you for joining the meeting.
Hi, this is Phoebe Pagano. And actually, I have a question rather than a comment. Why wouldn't laid off people be eligible to be rehired?
Inga, do you want to respond to that?
Sure.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to imply that eligible people, I mean, the people who are laid off wouldn't be eligible to be rehired. But the question is, if we're not bringing back the exact position that a person was laid off from, there are different rules about how you do a recruitment. And so that's what I need clarity on.
Yes, I noticed that there's circulation assistant instead of library assistant. So is that something, how did you do that? So HR has approved these new job descriptions, and a programming specialist, we never had that before. So yeah,
Great.
I'm wondering how all this is going to work.
So the library, the circulation assistants are library assistants. So to clarify that, the programming specialist is instead of a librarian, and so it's not at the same classification as a librarian. So that is a different position.
Do you have to be I mean, do they need to be a librarian to fill the position?
No.
No.
Yeah.
So if I could just might add, so part of this plan involved a reorganization because of the huge amount of budget cut we had to absorb. And that was my understanding, and that we had to take a look at all the functions of the library and sort of reconfigure things to do our core functions with less. And so some of the positions changed, is my understanding.
That's right.
I can't see that. I mean, except we're adding a program specialist, but all the other positions are the same we always had. They're just part-time, seasonal instead of full-time. You know, in the phase 1. I mean, or phase 2. 1 is where we are now.
Mhm.
So anyway, the people who are here working part-time, who used to be full-time or regular part-time, to me, they should take precedence becoming back to regular part-time. Actually, I don't think there are any full-time. Then putting in a new programming specialist, full-time, with all the benefits. That's an expensive position. And I wonder, what was your thinking in doing that, instead of getting Jocelyn and Carl back sooner, where they used to be?
I think that's a great question. I realize that since this is public comment, I shouldn't be trying to answer those questions, but I'm happy to talk with you, Phoebe, at a later date. I mean, we can talk together about it.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I'm reassured that
Thank you for your.
most people will be able to come. Because I don't see any positions being really eliminated. So it sounds like it's laid off people will be able to come back. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for your input.
And there are no additional callers.
So we're ready for a motion about this plan.
I'd be happy to make a motion to that the board approve the revised reopening plan, and also that the board ask or request the library director to convey to the city manager's office and the HR Human Resources Department that we would request they work with the director to do any preliminary work that would be helpful to allow us to reopen the library in a timely basis, and not wait until after the city council has adopted the final budget before doing such preliminary work.
I'd be happy to second that.
Trustee Felger.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Trustee Petty.
Jim, as a friendly amendment, could we make that 2 motions? One to approve the plan and one to go through with the request that you tacked onto it?
Be happy to do that if you prefer it that way. So I would modify my motion to first motion to just be to approve the reopening plan as submitted.
And again, I will second that as amended.
Any other feedback on there before we vote? Okay, we're ready to vote.
Trustee Felger,
Yes.
Trustee Joshi,
Yes,
Trustee Petty,
Yes,
Vice Chair Thompson,
Yes,
Chair Moreau.
Yes. Okay, so we've got an approved plan. And now, would you like to make the second motion?
I'd be happy to make that second part of my original motion now, but before I do that, I'd like to see if Bob had a different approach to that he'd like to suggest.
no, I thought your wording was just fine. I just think it would have a little bit more impact if
Okay.
it wasn't in addition to the approving of the plan, but it was a separate, thought, request, or whatever from the board.
Okay, very good.
And I was hoping that we could say something about being able to determine an opening date. And I'm not sure if you can work that in there so that we can, inform the public in a timely manner about an opening date. But I don't, if it fits into that motion.
Maybe that could be a goal of what Jim is proposing in the motion.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Do I need to try to rephrase that, or do we have enough of it to
Wow.
consider that a motion?
What, yeah, can you repeat it?
I'm not sure. My motion is that the board direct the library director to communicate a request of the board to the city manager's office and the human resources department that they work with the director to do any preliminary work that would be helpful to allow the library to hire the staff necessary for the reopening of the library in order that we can establish a better target date for the reopening of the library.
Now
A
be
more
happy to
accurate
second.
target date.
I'm sorry?
A more accurate target date,
Well, establish a date. And I think
or rather than better, because we don't have one now to
Okay,
be better than.
Establish a date. Yes, that's a good correction. Thank you. I accept that.
And I'll second it.
any other comments on that motion? Okay.
Actually, I would just ask the library director if she has any suggestions to improve the motion to help her with the getting ready to reopen.
I think that's good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
do you have a target date in mind? It just as a hypothetical one, if I were to ask for it.
Well, we know it's July. We
Right.
agreed that we're telling everyone sometime in July. And
Right.
probably the first is too soon. So in my mind, it was somewhere around the middle of July, but
The middle to the latter half of July, just because depending on the way the process works, there might be, people might need time and so forth to wrap up whatever else they're doing before they're able to work on the positions that we would like them to fill.
okay. So are we ready to vote?
Trustee Felger,
Yes.
Trustee Joshi,
Yes,
Trustee Petty,
Yes,
Vice Chair Thompson,
Yes,
Chair Moreau.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have then approval on that. And now we move on to the update. Is that an outside call? Is that public input? That barking?
Maybe barking from my house. It's like anybody that walks down the sidewalk, my dogs feel that that's their territory.
I thought it was comment on the motion, maybe.
No, they sound much larger than they are. The heaviest one's 13 pounds. So It's two little miniature loudmouth dogs. Would you like me to report on the Ad Hoc Library Survey Committee? Inga and I met on Monday and talked about possible service concerns and survey options. And we came to the conclusion that given the lack of funding and staff, we recommend waiting a period of time after the library reopens with its new service hours and staffing patterns to conduct a user survey, the goal of which will be to fine-tune library offerings to better align with community needs. We'll know a little bit more when we've actually done a reopening and had a few weeks under our belt. During that interval, patrons will be encouraged to offer suggestions and feedback. And based on this information, a survey would be developed to further refine hours and services. We're really concerned about avoiding the possibility of creating false expectations among library users, promising things or suggesting that we might be able to do things that in reality we can't due to either budget or staffing constraints. And we also wanted to avoid finger pointing and friction between city staff and library users who may want more services or service hours than the current library budget will allow. I don't know, Inga, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to this?
No, I think that's an excellent summary of what we discussed.
Any comments, questions? I'll start off with the question. So your idea would be to use, have your say Monterey and put up a survey that way, or ask users as they come into the library to fill out something, or both, or
Probably
So I
a combination. I
Yeah,
would think of the two. You're probably going to want to get enough feedback during the initial reopening to kind of get an idea of where the survey will go. I mean,
yeah. And the thing is that while Have Your Say Monterey looks really exciting and so forth, it does require people to have the technology to fill it out. And
Yeah.
that is one of the things that we've been worried about all along. And with our closure is, are we hearing from the folks that don't have the technology to let us know what they think or what they want and what they need? So
you're looking at something that, like a very short survey that people would fill out in paper, almost like a suggestion box.
Yeah.
They would fill out and drop somewhere. Or-
And what we have done in the past when we've done surveys with SurveyMonkey, for instance, is you can collect responses and then enter them. A staff or volunteer can enter them into the program. So then you can still get all the nice tabulations and so forth that comes with using a program like that.
Bob.
A brief survey consisting of the same items would be available for somebody to fill out online, or maybe when they were checking out a book and actually inside the library, if either they preferred to do it that way or they didn't have the technology to do it on the internet.
Right. And initially when we reopened, and this is what we used to do when we were open, is if somebody had a really strong opinion about something, we would offer them the suggestion form and say, we really want to hear back from you. So we're really evaluating what we're doing here. And so please fill out the suggestion form. So we want to make sure that we capture those comments, even in the first weeks of being reopened.
Jim.
I just wanted to follow up on our previous discussion about the sidewalk service and request that we included something in the survey related to whether to continue the sidewalk service consistent with our previous discussion.
One of the things that we'll have when we reopen is we will have new gates, and the gates can tell us what the volume of use is, or people coming in and out of the building throughout the day. So that will give us a better sense of which are the busiest days and times. And then with sidewalk service, we'll have be able to track transactions, and we'll use the same hand counter that we've been using. And so it's possible even that we would look at, oh, look, people don't come in the first 2 hours on a Saturday morning, but we have a lot of people that still want sidewalk service. Let's do that once a week on Saturday mornings, or there could be that kind of adjustment too if needed.
Any other comments on this item? Do we need public comment? I guess if Nat were here, he would say we need public comment. So,
You can do the abbreviated version.
yeah.
If there are any callers who would like to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or please press *9 to raise your hand if on telephone. There are no public comments.
Okay, thank you. So now we move on to the update from the Ad Hoc RFID Committee.
Okay, well, I have numbers hot off the computer. So we, as we know, we've been tagging, and then we've been encoding our collection. That's sort of where we have been with the RFID project. And all the books were completed on the 21st, so that's great. And then our new total is, we've done a total of 81,027 items, and we're wrapping up the encoding of DVDs, and we're doing audiobooks, and then these devices called playaways. We have a few hundred of those. So David says that it looks like we'll be done easily by the end of next week, if not sooner. So that's the good news. It's better to do the bad news and then the good news. But the bad news, which I just learned yesterday, so my fellow committee member hasn't even heard yet about this, is that there's a delay in the delivery of our gates. So our gates are going to have a ramp. Our gates are not going to be dug into the floor. So we said no to jackhammering and that sort of thing, to lay the conduit, to then lay the cables and so forth. So we were not going to do that. And so instead, there has to be a ramp that goes across the gate that covers over the wires and that kind of stuff. And that ramp is being constructed in another country, and then it gets shipped to Australia, and then from Australia it gets shipped to us. So what they've said is there's been a delay, and they haven't given us a new ETA because our installation date was going to be the 8th and 9th of June. So they said they have to reschedule that with us, but they believe that there is going to be time in June when they can do the installation. So that's, and we've asked, couldn't we have the gates without the ramp? We're closed. We don't need to be worrying about people tripping over it. And we were told no. And could we have some of the other things installed before the gates? No. So, but it looks like Trustee Thompson has a question.
Yeah, just to help me understand, I realize it sounds like hopefully that'll be done by the end of June. But worst case, if it gets delayed for whatever reason, would that prevent reopening the library if we didn't have the gates by the time we were ready to reopen?
That is a good question, because part of our reopening plan and our staffing plan is based on the idea that we don't need as much staff because we're using RFID. And if we don't have the gates, then we won't be able to use, and we haven't had the rest of the equipment installed, we won't be able to use RFID. So yeah, we have to, the plan was to have RFID in place before we reopen.
But in the absence of RFID, we could continue as we are right now until we get it.
A sidewalk service, yes.
Right. And possibly start the bookmobile without RFID?
So that is a good question. That's something that we need to think about, because the bookmobile was going to use RFID as well. But yes, and Trustee Joshi.
Yes. I'm looking at this page 22 with the financial numbers. How did we do in the comparison to that?
How is
Did we
our-
come under the budget? Have you spent all the money?
We haven't spent all the money yet, because in the contract, it's you pay 50% up front and then 50% when you're happy with the results.
But how do the numbers look?
It looks like we are coming in slightly under.
Mhm.
So in other words, the project won't halt because of lack of funding.
Right. Funding is not an issue. I mean, we're being cautious, but it's not as if it's going over budget.
That's
Jim,
Does the contract have a schedule, and are there penalties if they don't get it installed by the end of June? Do you know?
That's a good question. I don't think there is a schedule like that. So I'll have to revisit the contract. Good point.
Just, I'm again, hopefully it won't come to that, but if there are major delays and it's going to create a problem with reopening, it'd be nice to have all available tools to put pressure on them to complete the project.
Yeah, I even asked David yesterday, could we just go with a different style gate, So we'll look at all possibilities.
Thank you.
so do you think you have any idea whether it's a shipping delay or part of the chip shortage that's holding up cars and iPads and everything else now?
I don't know what it is they're having to build the ramp for us. And so they've said there's been a delay in building it, but I don't know if it's the materials have been delayed or what.
Well, I guess all you can do is get the answers, figure out whether these things, whether the bookmobile could run as it is, and let's see what happens. Other comments on RFID? Other than, but please tell David that he's done an amazing job to herd all those volunteers and get it done in time and get it done kind of ahead of schedule even. It's been wonderful.
I will. Thank you. Yeah, he's been working very, very, very hard on it. So he'll appreciate that.
Okay. All right. Any abbreviated public comment? How's that?
For anyone who would like to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9 to raise your hand if on phone. There are no public comments.
Thank you. All right, let's move to the financial report. Item 8.
I don't have anything to share about it, but if I'm happy to entertain questions.
Anybody have any questions? Oh, Jim.
Not a question, just a comment. I appreciate the readability of the written report. We've had a few problems with this over the past several months, but this one was very clear, and I'm fine with it, and I appreciate that.
Great.
Okay. Any comments? Okay, so let's move on to the statistical report. Any, you want to say anything about it, or Inga, you want to just open for question?
I just will point out, which is in the footnote at the bottom, that this is the first month where we are comparing being closed due to COVID to a month that we were fully closed due to COVID. So in the past, in the month of March, for instance, we had been partially open and then we closed last year. So anyway, this is the first time we're comparing those kinds of numbers. And you can see, for instance, that borrowing is much higher now than it was a year ago because, of course, we didn't have sidewalk service a year ago. So just wanted to note that.
Actually, along those lines, if I do have a question. Since that's going to be a data comparison issue for quite some time, making it hard to look at comparing to the previous year, would it make any sense, and would it be not that difficult to add, a 3-year comparison? In other words, include April of 19 as well as 20 and 21. Again, I'm not sure if that's extremely difficult, then I don't think it's that important. But if it happened to be easy, it might make the numbers a little bit more meaningful.
Yeah, I think, yeah, but also 21 is also an anomalous year in some sense. So it's 18 and 22 or 23 will be the better comparisons, I think. We have a couple of years here in which all bets are off, I think.
Right. I think once we reopen, it will be helpful to see what a typical August, for instance, is when we're open. So August of 19, to see, are we, how much lower are our numbers than a typical year, or higher than a typical year.
Yes, and that's a really good reason for doing that previous one, is just once we do get back to normal, I think it would be really good to check that. Bob.
Yeah, I think that's a very good request, and having the data from a month during a pre-pandemic year for comparison. I don't think we need to fuss with modifying this chart and adding another column. We could just add one sentence in the discussion at the bottom of the preceding page that says, by comparison, April of 2019, in April of 2019, X number of books were checked out or X number of programs were held. And that data is, readily available just by going back to the agenda packet from a year or two ago. I mean, it's not something that I'm clearing out my office at home, and I probably have hard copies of that information still shoved in a file cabinet somewhere. But it would be easy just to add a sentence or two there.
Yeah, I'd be happy with either approach, either adding a column or not adding a column and doing what Bob suggested. Either one is fine with me.
Yeah, but I think it would be good additional information. And I also wanted to comment again in a slightly different way with regard to the adult programming. And I guess it's a sort of indirect compliment for those who have been providing and creating the virtual programming for adults that we've pretty much had, well, in total, the last year or so. And if you look to the previous April or year over, either way, while the number of programs for adults is down, for example, 67% April to April, I mean, one April compared to the next, or year total to year total down over half, the attendance isn't down anywhere near as much. So, more people are coming to fewer programs per program, not in total. And I think that speaks to the value of that type of service and obviously the quality of the adult program that we've been able to offer in a alternate method.
I also want to mention the volunteer hours, which is right at the bottom. The fact that we were closed and had 35 volunteers and 432 hours of volunteers just is a real tribute to the passion that our constituents have for this library, that they would.
Yeah, we're very grateful for our volunteers.
I would also remind folks that the Ad Hoc Benchmarking Committee is finishing up its work and looking at data fields that we ought to be examining. So if you have, I think we asked this last month, but we'll ask again, if you have any input onto things that you would like to see in some of these reports that you're not seeing, or stuff that you don't need to see, please let Inga or me or Jim know, because we're working with the city manager's office to try to come up with a uniform data set that we'll all look at, that will help to benchmark what the library is doing. So we don't have requests coming in over the transom from the city manager's office. Oh, by the way, did you collect this? Did you collect that? We would like to have a consistent set of data. So any input over the next couple of weeks would be appreciated. Any other comments on the data? We need public comment on that? Oh, yes. Okay, abbreviated. We'll do abbreviated.
For anyone who would like to make a comment, please raise your Zoom hand or press *9 to make a comment. There are no public comments.
Okay, so now we finish up our meeting with the trustee comments. So we start out with Trustee Felgus.
Mute myself here. Well, I'm very, very excited about a potential reopening and also about the summer reading program. It looks wonderful. I wish we had these technologies and programs like this when I was working as a public librarian. It looks very dynamic. So kudos to the staff. This is going to be great. Thank you.
Yeah, Trustee Joshi.
I too am looking forward to the library reopening. I hope to see you there. Hopefully we'll get rid of these Zoom meetings and actually meet in person.
Trustee Petty.
The way in which I'm looking forward to the reopening is not only to reduce the frustration that many people, not just the board, but many patrons of the library have felt for well over a year, but to put into effect the use of new technologies and new types of programs and innovations that we may not, trying to find a bright side, we may not have run across or thought of had we not been forced to shut down and kind of look inward a little bit. And so I'm looking forward to the advancements, if you want to call them that, that we're going to be able to do. And everybody's talking about a new normal and not just, same old. And I think that's, for me, the encouraging part of what's upcoming in the next 6 months.
Trustee.
I'd just like to echo the comments my fellow board members have made. I agree with everything they've all said. And I'd also like to repeat the commendation that I tried to mention earlier on the reopening plan, that I think Inga and the other staff, as well as Marcia and Bob on the planning committee, have just done an excellent job creating this reopening plan. And I really appreciate all the hard work that's gone into it. And I sure hope it goes well.
And I'll close by thanking all of you for all the work that you've done on all the committees and all the input and all the support that you've given the library, and in particular the fundraising folks who have been helping us to fill the gaps that we have and allowing us to move forward. So on that note, meeting adjourned.